You're probably used to thinking of a cold beer or a glass of wine as a modern luxury. It seems like the kind of thing humans would only invent after they mastered the absolute basics of survival, like building shelters and growing crops. The accepted historical timeline backs up that logic. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans were strictly hunter-gatherers. They moved constantly, carrying their lives on their backs, relying entirely on what they could forage or hunt in the wild. Eventually, they decided to settle down. They invented agriculture to secure a stable food supply, built permanent villages, and much later stumbled upon the chemistry of fermentation. This sequence forms the foundation of how we explain the transition from nomadic life to the first cities. In this view, alcohol is a secondary result of human progress, arriving only after the primary problems of survival were solved. But in 2018, archaeologists excavating Rokhefet Cave, Israel, found stone mortars carved directly into the bedrock. Inside those 13,000-year-old mortars, they detected chemical traces of wild wheat and barley that had been intentionally soaked, germinated, and left to ferment. It was a prehistoric brewery. 1,000 years later, a group in what is now southeastern Turkey organized the labor to build Göbekli Tepe. They carved stone pillars weighing over 10 tons, arranged them in deliberate circles, and left behind large stone vats containing the distinct chemical residue of fermented grain. These were large-scale, deliberate brewing operations. Yet the people hauling those 10-ton stones and soaking that grain had not yet invented agriculture. They were still fully nomadic hunter-gatherers. Finding massive, organized fermentation vats that predate the invention of farming breaks our chronological timeline. These people were brewing long before they had permanent homes. The biological drive to seek out alcohol actually starts about 10 million years ago on a forest floor in Africa, when an early primate picks up a piece of fruit that has been sitting on the ground for a bit too long. When fruit falls, its natural sugars break down. Wild yeast enters, starting fermentation, producing small amounts of ethanol. For early ancestors, this scent acted as an olfactory beacon, signaling rich calories. Eating it triggered a mild neurobiological reward. Feeling intoxicated created a positive feedback loop. Biologist Robert Dudley formalized this as the drunken monkey hypothesis. By the time ancient humans finally evolved, the taste for alcohol was already hardwired into our brains as an ancient survival trait. Archaeobotanist Patrick McGovern connects this ancient biological impulse directly to the behavior of early human hunter-gatherers. He suggests our ancestors' deep-seated drive for ethanol is the reason they decided to stop wandering. If you want to make bread from wild grain, you have to collect it, grind it, knead it, and bake it. It requires an immense amount of manual labor. Making beer is much simpler. You soak the grain in water and let natural fermentation do the work. By 9,000 years ago in the village of Jihao, China, humans were already mixing wild grapes, hawthorn berries, honey, and rice to create highly intentional, complex fermented beverages. Humanity likely took up the grueling work of domesticating crops, not to secure a steady supply of bread, but to establish a permanent, reliable supply of alcohol. To see what happens when that agricultural pursuit of alcohol scales up into an empire, we look to ancient Egypt about 5,000 years ago. The workers responsible for hauling limestone blocks through the desert heat to build the Great Pyramids didn't work for coins. They were paid an actual daily salary of 4 to 5 liters of thick, nutrient-dense beer. The brewing process made the liquid safer to drink than the contaminated Nile water, while adding the calories needed to move limestone. Egyptians even used it as a delivery system for medicine, an essential part of temple offerings to the god Osiris. In the ancient world, alcohol was a critical survival multi-tool that simultaneously acted as currency, medicine, and clean water infrastructure. Our ancestors began by seeking out overripe fruit on the forest floor. That specific biological impulse pushed them to plant fields, invent agriculture, and ultimately fuel the labor forces that built massive ancient monuments. Today, when you raise a glass, you are continuing an ancient survival instinct. The process is refined, and the cups are made of glass instead of bedrock, but the behavioral impulse remains exactly the same. Civilization didn't give humanity the luxury of alcohol. Our biological drive for alcohol is what pushed humanity to build civilization in the first place.